In the dark shadows, in the white cold, fearlessly we search for knowledge new and old. We drink the strong spirits and read the ancient tomes. The order of the Abracast. We are the brave and the bold.
Then Pharaoh also called for the wise men and the sorcerers. And the magicians of Egypt did the same with their secret arts, for each one threw down his staff and they turned into serpents. But Aaron's staff swallowed up their staves, yet Pharaoh's heart was hardened, and he did not listen to them, as the Lord said. Exodus 7:11.
The Abracast, occult, history, conspiracy, and violence.
Well, I feel like this is an end of an era here at the Abracast. I'm John Towers. Yeah, man, it seems like we've been working on the Goetia or the Solomonic texts for a long fucking time. And I'm happy to say, well, I'm sad. It's bittersweet, I guess, that this is the last of the Goetia episodes. To kind of pad it out a little bit further, we've been doing, between the Testament of Solomon episodes, we've been doing Demons of Solomon after the each one of them. And so this is the last of the kind of commentary or unpacking of the Testament of Solomon episode. So if you survived this long, pat yourself on the back. It's been great to do, and I love it. And I look back at all of those episodes very fondly. All of the lesser keys of Solomon, especially the greater keys of Solomon, and now these Testament of Solomon books. So just a reminder that when you sign into the Fulgur Correspondentia, the mailing list, there you would get access to it's called the Goetia worksheet. It just helps you break down your ritual to make sure that you have everything that you need. It's not a substitute for the text. It's a workbook. It's like something that you use with the text. I have one filled out. I filled out a Goetic worksheet for a specific experiment or operation. So it's fun. It's a good time. Sign into the Fulgur Correspondentia. Also, if you find it this month, there's a bunch of stuff in there. The only place I could have actually swung it was on my website. But if you sign into the Fulgur Correspondentia, you get a link to the degree of the Fulgur Correspondentia stuff. It's where we keep all the extra stuff that goes along with the degree. There's some Kama Sutra. There's some dirty Kama Sutra art on there from our Kama Sutra episode last month. There's a brief timeline of Genesis up there, getting you up to speed to the Sodom and Gomorrah episode. And I think there was one other thing. I can't remember what it was. But anyhow, the Fulgur Correspondentia stuff is great. I finally got it into some kind of shape. So I'm happy about it, and I'm putting a lot of work in to make sure that it's worth all of our whiles. So please go ahead and sign in there. That's something that you might like to do. You know what I'm saying? We did Demons of Solomon for part 1 and for part 2. We talked about the swine of Golgotha and all of that Tonight, we are going to be talking about a lot of talk about these two dudes from the cold open, these Egyptian magicians or the Egyptian wizards from Exodus who appear in, the Jin Jihad book and the Ages. Actually, yeah, both of my latest graphic novels, these two dudes are in them. They're in them. So I have some history with these chaps, and also this story from the cold open where it's the magic duel section of Exodus where Aaron's staff turns into a serpent, and then these two dudes' staff turn into serpents, and then Aaron's staff eats their serpent. So one of the cool things that you get in the Fulgar Correspondentia, and not to fucking bash you guys over the head with this thing, but one of the cool things that you get is you get access to the drafts of the tarot cards I'm designing. And this story is definitely, it is the card, the Three of Wands, harkens to this story. So if you're interested in that, there's two ways that you can get to the tarot card info dump, as I call it. You can sign into the Fulgar Correspondentia, and it's got its own like little landing page where it has the images, or you can sign into the Fulgar Correspondentia, take advantage of signing up for our Slack work group. And in the work group, there's the images of the tarot cards, and then also there's like the huge write-ups from all of the tarot card episodes that I've done. I basically busted out. So it's like Waite, Pappas, and McGregor Mathers, their take on each of the cards, and I just jammed them like right in there on the Slack work group. And it's pretty up to date. I think about 6 cards that I still need to get done. I'm kind of dragging my feet on them, actually. I'm doing a little bit of procrastination. So, the featured books for this evening is Legends of the Jews by Ginsberg, the Bible, of course. And then we're also going to check into The Sacred Fire from B.Z. Goldberg. This is going to be a fun episode. So for you guys that are playing along at home, I would like you to summon your vessel of the art. And I would like for you to mix up your weapon of mass distraction, your holy water, as it were. Tonight I have a Jin Jihad, like most of the time. And I would like for you to raise your vessel to the sky and say salute to all my Patreon and Subscribe Star supporters. Thank you very much for your support, and I appreciate it. What we're talking about? Oh yeah, these two Egyptian magicians appear in the Bible in that short passage from the cold open. In the Testament of Solomon, they appear in 125. 125 says, "And I, Solomon," God, this drinking game. I established this drinking game like I don't know, 6 episodes ago, maybe. Whenever in the Testament of Solomon, where he says, "I, Solomon," we have to drink. So. Here's to you. But be safe about it, all right? Questioned the other spirit which came up with the pillar from the depth of the Red Sea. And I said to him, "Who art thou? And what calls thee? And what is thy business? For I hear many things about thee." And the demon answered, "I, O King Solomon, is called Ebzith Abad. I am a descendant of the archangel. Once I sat in the first heaven, of which the name is Amaluath. I then am a fierce spirit and winged, and with a single wing plotting against every spirit under heaven. I was present when Moses went before Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And it was I that hardened his heart. And I am he who Ianes and Jambres evoked homing with Moses in Egypt. I am he who fought against Moses with the wonders and the signs. So it's important to note here that there is an apocrypha of Ioannes in Jambres, but it is a book that is lost to history. So we're going to look at some of the other stories of these guys. So the first sources or whatever that I came into contact with these guys called them like Jannes and Jambres, Jannes, and Jambres, Jambres. But conversely, they are Ioannes and Jambres as well. They have like a flashback appearance in the New Testament, Timothy 2:3, 2 Timothy 3:8. Now, as Jannes and Jambres withstood Moses, so do these also resist the truth. The men of corrupt minds reprobate concerning the faith. And in Ellicott's commentary for English readers, now Jannes and Jambres withstood Moses, to one brought up like Timothy by a pious Jewish mother, who was from a child knew the holy scriptures and all of the history and ancient traditions connected with the early history of his people. Such a comparison would be very striking. No child of Israel could hear the name Moses, the loved hero of the chosen people, unmoved, and to be told that these false teachers of Ephesus stood in the same relation to him and to the Church of Christ as in old days. In the never-to-be-forgotten Egyptian episode, those famous magicians, Jannes and Jambres, stood to Moses, would throw for Timothy a new light on all the worlds and the works of these wicked and ambitious men. We can well imagine the comparison being repeated in many and assembly of the faithful, along with the great apostles' death. How St. Paul had likened these early, this is a good one, heresiarchs, for those evil men who before Pharaoh had dared to resist God and his servant Moses. These magicians also termed wise men and sorcerers in Exodus 7:11 through 22 at the court of Pharaoh appears as the enemies of Moses. The name Jannes and Jambres, although not given in the sacred text, are preserved in the oral tradition of Israel. The names are found in the Targum of Jonathan on Exodus 7:11 through Exodus 22:22. These traditions relate on how these men were the sons of Balaam. And in the first instance, they were instructors to Moses, because Moses grew up in Pharaoh's house. Although subsequently his enemies and opponents, one legend mentions them as perishing in the catastrophe when the waves of the Red Sea overwhelmed the armies of Egypt. Another tradition speaks of them having met their death in the slaughter after the worship of the golden calf, making of which they advised. It was their prophetic words, so say these legendary histories, which foretelling the birth of Moses included Pharaoh to give this order for the destruction of the Jewish children, and later Jews distorted the names into John and Ambrose. In the legends of the Jews before the Exodus, there's this story of Balaam and his two sons, Jannes and Jambres, and they are like flying through the air and stuff. Here, I'll read some of it. When Balaam saw the city had fallen into the hands of the besiegers, he exercised his magic arts, which enabled him to fly through the air. And he carried with him his two sons, Jannes and Jambres, and his 8 brothers, and they all took refuge in Egypt. So, in the Legend of the Jews, Ginsberg, Volume 1, Moses and Aaron before Pharaoh. The day Moses and Aaron made their appearance before Pharaoh happened to be the anniversary of his birth. Pharaoh's birth, I guess. And he was surrounded by many kings, for he was the ruler of the whole world. And this was the occasion on which the kings of the earth came to him in homage. And the attendants announced Moses and Aaron. Pharaoh inquired whether the two old men had brought him crowns, and receiving a negative reply, he ordered that they were not to be admitted to his presence until he had seen and dismissed all other desirous of paying him their respects. Pharaoh's palace was surrounded by a vast army, which was built with 400 entrances, 100 on each side, and each of them guarded by 60,000 soldiers. And Moses and Aaron were overawed by this display of power. They were afraid, but the angel Gabriel appeared, and he led them into the palace, observed by none of the guards. And Pharaoh decreed severe punishment upon the inattentive sentinels for having admitted these old men without his permission. They were dismissed and others were put into their place, and the same thing happened the next day. Moses and Aaron were within the palace, and the new guard had not been able to hinder their passing. Pharaoh questioned his servants how it had been possible for these two old men to enter. And they said, "We know not. Through the doors they did not come. Surely they must be magicians." Not enough that the palace was guarded by a host. At each entrance, 2 lions were stationed, and in terror of being torn to pieces, none dared approach the door, and none could go within until the lion tamer came and led the beasts away. And now Balaam and all of the other sacred scribes of Egypt advised that the keepers loose the lions at the approach of Moses and Aaron. But their advice availed not. Moses but had to raise his rod, and the lions bound towards him joyously and followed at his feet, gambolling like dogs before their master on his return home. Within the palace, Moses and Aaron found 70 secretaries busy with the Pharaoh's correspondence, which was carried in 70 languages at the sight of the messengers of Israel. They started up in great awe, for the 2 men resembled angels in stature. They were as the cedars of Lebanon, and their countenance radiated splendor like the sun, and the pupil of their eyes were like the sphere of the morning star, and their beards like palm branches, and their mouths emitted flames when they opened them for speech. In their terror, the secretaries flung down pen and paper and prostrated themselves before Moses and Aaron. Now, the 2 representatives of the children of Israel stepped before Pharaoh, and they spake, "The God of the Hebrews has met with us. Let us go, we pray thee, 3 days' journey into the wilderness, and sacrifice unto the Lord our God, lest he fall upon us with pestilence or with the sword." But Pharaoh answered, saying, "What is the name of your God? Wherein doth his strength consist and his power? How many countries, how many provinces, how many cities hath he under his dominion? And how many campaigns was he victorious? And how many lands did he make subject unto himself? How many cities did he capture? When he goeth to war, how many warriors, riders, chariots, and charioteers doth he lead forth?" Whereto Moses and Aaron replied, "His strength and his powers fill the whole world. His voice heweth out flames of fire, and his words break mountains in pieces. The heaven is his throne, and the earth his footstool. His bow is fire, and his arrows are flames. His spears, torches, his shields, clouds. And his sword, lightning flashes. He created the mountains and the valleys, and he brought forth spirits and souls, and he stretched out the earth by a word. He made mountains with his wisdom, and he forms the embryo in the womb of the mother, and he covers the heavens with clouds. At his word, the dew and the rain descend earthward. He causes plants to grow from the ground. He nourishes and sustains the whole world from the horn upon the rim down to the eggs of vermin. Every day he causes men to die, and every day he calls men into life. Well, Pharaoh said, I have no need of him. I have created myself, and if ye say that he causes dew and rain to descend, I have the Nile, the river that hath its source under the tree of life. And the ground impregnated by its water bears fruit so huge that it takes 2 asses to carry it. It is palatable beyond description, for it has 300 different tastes. Then Pharaoh sent to fetch the books of the chroniclers of his kingdom from his archives, wherein are recorded the names of the gods of all nations, to see whether the name of the God of the Hebrews was among them. And he read off the God of Moab, the God of Ammon, the God of Zidon. I do not find your God inscribed in these archives. Moses and Aaron exclaimed, O thou fool, thou seekest the living in the graves of the dead. These which thou didst read are the names of dumb idols, and our God is the God of life and the King of eternal life. When the Pharaoh said the words, I know not the Lord, God himself made answer, saying, O thou rascal, thou sayest to my ambassadors, I know not the strength and the power of your God. Lo, I will make thee stand, for to show thee my power, and that my name may be declared through all your earth. Having searched his list of the gods of the nations in vain for a mention of the God of the Hebrews, Pharaoh cited before him the wise men of Egypt, and he said to them, Have ye ever heard the name of the God of these people? And they replied, We have been told that he is a son of the wise and ancient son of ancient kings. Then spake God, saying, O ye fools, you call yourself wise men, but me ye call only the son of the wise. Verily, I will set all naught, all your wisdom and your understanding. Pharaoh persisted in his obduracy. Even after Moses and Aaron had performed the miracle of the rod, at the time when the 2 Hebrews succeeded in entering the palace, guarded as it was by lions, Pharaoh had sent for his magicians, and their head Balaam and his 2 sons Jambres and Jambres. And when they appeared before him, they told them of the extraordinary incident, how the lions had followed the 2 old men like dogs and fawned upon them. And it was Balaam's opinion that they were simply magicians like himself and his companions, and he prayed the king have them come before him together with themselves to test who were master magicians, the Egyptians or the Hebrews. And Pharaoh called for Moses and Aaron, and he said to them, Who will believe you when you say that you are ambassadors of God, as you pretend to be, if you do not convince men by performing wonders? Thereupon Aaron cast his rod on the ground, and it became a serpent, and Pharaoh laughed aloud. What? He exclaimed, Is this all your God can do? It is the way of the merchants to carry merchandise to a place if there is none of it there. But who would anyone take brine to Spain or fish to Acco? It seems you do not know that I am an adept in all sorts of magic. And he ordered little school children to be brought, and they repeated the wonder done by Moses and Aaron. Indeed, Pharaoh's own wife performed it. Jannes and Jambres, the sons of Balaam, decried Moses, saying, Ye carry straw to Ephraim. Whereto Moses answered, To the place of many vegetables, thither carry vegetables. Cheeky. To show the Egyptians that Aaron could do something with his rod that their magicians could not imitate, God caused the serpent into which his rod had been changed to swallow up all the rods of the magicians. This is a big sausage measuring party. But Balaam and his associates said, There is nothing marvelous or astonishing in this feat. Your serpent has but devoured our serpents, which is in accordance with the law of nature. One living being devours another. If thou wishest to acknowledge that the Spirit of God worketh in thee, then cast thy rod to earth. And if being wood it swallows up our rods of wood, then we shall acknowledge the Spirit of God is in thee. And Aaron stood up the test. And after his rod had resumed original form, it swallowed up the rods of the Egyptians, and yet its bulk showed no increase. This caused Pharaoh to reflect whether this wonderful rod of Aaron might not swallow up also him and his throne. Nevertheless, he refused to obey the behest of God to let Israel go, saying, I had Jacob, Israel himself, here before me, and I should put trowel and bucket on his shoulder. Damn. And to Moses and Aaron he said, Because ye, like all the rest of the tribe of Levi, are not compelled to labor, therefore do ye speak. Let us go and sacrifice to the Lord. If you had asked for 1,000 people or 2,000, I should have fulfilled your request. But never will I consent to letting 600,000 men go away. So I'm not going to get into the whole plague story, the killing of the first son stuff. We're just focusing on these two wizards. Eventually we'll get to these stories. Whenever God brought a new plague to these magicians, they would cast spells and so forth to produce the same or seemingly the same sort of phenomenon. So when God changes the water to blood, however, this plague did not impress Pharaoh as a punishment inflicted in the name of God, because with the help of the angels of destruction, the magicians of Egypt produced the same phenomenon by changing water into blood. Therefore he hearkened not unto the words of Moses. Now, although the Egyptian magicians also brought up frogs on the land of Egypt through the help of demons. Third plague. The Egyptian magicians, having boasted that they were able to produce the first two plagues in an attempt to boast, it was, for they did not bring them about with their enchantments, but only because Moses willed them to do it. God put them to shame with the third plague. And they tried in vain to imitate it, and the demons could not aid them, for their power is limited to the productions of things larger than a barley grain, and lice are smaller. The magicians had to admit, this is the finger of God. Their failure put an end once and for all to the attempts to do as Moses did. Fourth plague. Pharaoh's heart was hardened, and God spake to Moses, saying, This wicked fellow remains hard of heart. In spite of the three plagues, the fourth shall be much worse than those which have preceded it. Go to him before and warn him. It would be well for them to let my people go. that this plague come not upon him. The first 5 plagues the magicians had tried to imitate, and partly they had succeeded. In the 6th plague, they could not stand before Moses, and thenceforth they gave up the attempt to do as he did. In some of these stories, we've seen that these dudes can fly. In some of the stories, they fly to heaven, they make fucking assholes of themselves, and God sends angel after angel to stop them. And so it's like, Gabriel, go stop these fucking assholes. And then Gabriel actually gets outmatched by these wizards. And then he's like, Michael, go and stop these fucking assholes. And these 2 magicians outmatch Michael. So eventually he has to send the most powerful archangel, this guy named Metatron, who was once, as we know, I mean, we talked about this, he was once like a prophet. He was once a holy man named Enoch that got turned into an archangel. Basically, God snatched him up and put him in this like divine archangel power armor. And he was the only one powerful enough to like kick these asshole wizards out of heaven.
Learn more at abracast.com. Get bonus content and access to the private Abracast workgroup by signing up for the mailing list. Get all that plus many exclusive episodes by supporting the show at patreon.com or subscribestar.com.
Oh, impressive. Very well, Moses. I'll play along. Hotep, hoy! Give this snake charmer our answer.
So you think you've got friends in high places with the power to put us on the run?
Well, forgive us these smiles on our faces. You'll know what power is when we are done, son.
You're playing with the big boys now.
Playing with the big boys now.
Oh, that's pretty. Every spell and gesture
Tells you who's the best.
You're playing with the big boys now. You're playing with the big boys now. You're playing with the big boys now. Stop this foolish
Yo, Chuck, they're getting nervous. They can't handle this. They're gonna break down.
mission.
What's a true magician?
Give an exhibition how.
Pick up your silly twig, boy.
You're playing with the big boys now.
Yo, Chuck, yo, yeah, man. Yo, you got 'em running scared, man.
By the might of Horus, you will kneel before us, kneel to us and daughters. You put up a front, you put up a fight, and just to show we feel no spite,
You can be our acolyte.
but first, boy, it's time to bow. For it's your way to
Bring that back one more time. Bring that beat back, man. Bring that beat back. Bring the beat back. Y'all want to hear that beat, right? Bring that beat back. Bring that shit back. 1, 2, 3, 4, hit it.
This shit ain't over. Come on, y'all. Let's get busy. Come on. Say yeah. Say hell yeah. Come on, y'all. Come on. Let's rock the house. Somebody. Everybody. Everybody scream.
Ain't it funky?
on this month's exclusive Order of the Fellowcraft episode.
This Halloween, we are summoning the rider on the red horse. I evoke the bornless one, that didst create the earth and the heavens, that didst create the night and the day, that didst create the darkness and the light. Thou art Os Oran O Ferris, whom no man has seen at any time. Thou art Jambres, and thou art Japus. Thou hast distinguished between the just and the unjust, and thou didst make the female and the male. And thou didst produce the seed and the fruit, and thou didst form men to love one another and to hate one another. A high ritual from the Lesser Key of Solomon.
Learn more at abracast.com. Support the show at patreon.com or subscribestar.com.
All right, let's get into another one. We're going to do another one here. The Other Gods of Solomon. The Testament of Solomon 1:2-8. Oh boy. And I, Solomon, glorified God and adorned in the temple of the Lord with all fair seeming. And I was glad in spirit in my kingdom, and there was peace in my days. And I took wives of my own from every land who were numberless. And I marched against the Jebusians, and I saw there Jebusian daughter of man, and I fell violently in love with her, and demanded her to take her to wife along with my other wives. And I said to the priests, "Give me son manatees to wife." But the priests of Molech said to me, "If thou lovest this maiden, go in and worship our gods, the great god Raphan and the god called Molech." I therefore was in fear of the glory of God, and did not follow to worship. But I said to them, "I will not worship a strange god. What is this proposal that ye compel me to do as much?" And they said, "By our fathers." 1:2-9. And when I answered that I would on no account worship strange gods, they told the maiden not to sleep with me until I complied to the sacrifice to their gods. And then I was moved. But crafty Eros brought and laid by her for me 5 grasshoppers, saying, "Take these grasshoppers and crush them together in the name of the god Molech, and then I will sleep with you." And this I actually did. And at once the Spirit of God departed from me, and I became weak as well as foolish in my words. And after that I was obliged to build her a temple of idols to Baal and to Rapha and to Molech and to other idols. Then, wretch that I am, followed her advice, and the glory of God quite departed from me, and my spirit was darkened, and I became the sport of idols and demons. Wherefore I wrote out this testament. And ye who get possession of it may pity and attend to the last things, and not to the first, so that ye may find grace forever and ever. Amen. So at the end of this Testament of Solomon, it kind of turns into a cautionary tale. He's like, hey, instead of fucking around with all these demons and stuff, you should pay attention to this part of the story, because it will give you nothing but hard problems. So let's talk about this Molech. Nowadays, in like the conspiracy culture, a lot of folks talk about Moloch, and you'll find yourself talking about Bohemian Grove and the cremation of Care and the burning of the effigy of the child, or Fritz Lang's 1920s movie Metropolis with the Moloch machine and all of this. And I'm not saying there's no merit in that stuff, but I'm just going to focus over here, right? In Kings, in the Bible, Kings 11:7, the Bible references the story of Solomon building an idol for Moloch. And then Solomon built a high place for Chemosh, the detestable idol of Moab, and the mountain which is in the east of Jerusalem, and for Moloch, the detestable idol of the sons of Ammon. So, why is Moloch detestable? Well, I'm glad you asked. There are other parts of the Old Testament that give us clues. So the Israelites have had this habit of reverting to other gods. Like when Moses went to receive the 10 commandments, he comes back down the mountain and he finds some of his people worshiping this golden calf. And he flips the fuck out, right? So God, Yahweh, is... he's really like jealous, and he's always telling everyone not to make idols and don't pray to any other gods before me and so forth. Like in Leviticus 18:21, neither shall you give any of your offspring to offer them to Moloch, nor shall you profane the name of your God. I am the Lord. Leviticus 20:2-5 explains that the punishment for worshiping specifically Moloch, whoever he be of the sons of Israel or of the strangers that sojourn in Israel, that gives any of his seed to Moloch, he shall surely be put to death, and the people of the land shall stone him with stones, and I will set my face against that man, and I will cut him off from among his people, because he has given his seed to Moloch, to defile my sanctuary and to profane my holy name. And if the people of the land do at all hide their eyes from that man when he gives his seed to Moloch, and do not kill him, then I will set my face against that man and against his family, and I will cut him off, and that will go astray after him, whoring after Moloch from among the people. Kings 23:10 says, he also defiled Tephath, which is in the valley of the son of Hinnom, that no man might make his son or his daughter pass through the fire for Moloch, which is linked to Jeremiah 7:31, which is in a way more specific. He says, and they have built the high places of Tophet, which is in the valley of the son of Hinnom, to burn their sons and their daughters in the fire, which I command them not, neither came it into my heart. In Jeremiah 32:35, they built the high places of Baal, that are in the valley of Ben Hinnom, and they caused their sons and daughters to pass through the fire of Moloch, which I had not commanded them, nor had it entered my mind that they should do this abomination to cause Judah to sin. Okay, so I found this in the Jewish Virtual Library. The legal and historical sources speak about passing children to Moloch in fire. According to the rabbinic interpretations, this prohibition is against passing children through fire and then delivering them into the pagan priests. In other words, according to this interpretation, this refers to the initiation rite. A similar non-sacrificial tradition, perhaps more ancient, is found in the Book of Jubilees. The Book of Jubilees 37 connects intermarriage, or rather the marrying off of one's children to pagans, with the sin of Moloch. In some interpretations, this is also a prohibition of Moloch as the impregnation of a pagan woman. All these traditions is the understanding of Moloch worship as the transfer of Jewish children to paganism, either by delivering them directly to pagan priests or by the procreation through intercourse with a pagan woman. But there's another train of thought. A much darker and more disturbing theory arises from this 12th century rabbi Rashi. And this is from the New World Encyclopedia. I guess there are more books here than I originally said were the feature books. Commenting on Jeremiah 7:31, Rashi stated that Moloch was made of brass, and they heated him from his lower parts, and his hands being stretched out and made hot. And they put the child between his hands, and it was burnt. And when it vehemently cried out, but the priests beat a drum, and the father might not hear the voice of his son, and his heart might not be moved. Another rabbinical tradition says that the idol was hollow and divided into 7 compartments, each of which contained a separate offering for the god. It was the compartment was flour, and the second was turtle doves, and the third was ewe, and the fourth a ram, and the fifth a calf, and the sixth an ox, and the seventh a child, all of which were burnt together by heating the statue inside. This is all very terrifying. Ugh. This song is too upbeat for that. So, we're going to switch gears. We're kind of going to go to The Sacred Fire by B.Z. Goldberg. This is 1930. Chapter 4, The Twilight with Moloch. Flame, fire, and frenzied passion, the god of love and desolation. Moloch was the mighty and gluttonous god. He bestowed his bounty upon mankind, and he wished a taste of all that he gave. Moloch gave only to be gifted in return. There was no altruistic hypocrisy in his little divine circle, and he was not saving the world, and he was not serving mankind. He cared for neither the praise nor the glory that others might give him. Moloch was a fierce, self-satisfied, masculine god. He defied the weaker sex, even in love. He had no women himself, nor did he wish his worshippers coming to his temples to trail their women along. He wanted none of their weakness, gentleness, delicacy, or romanticism. He was the god of muscle and belly. If cannibals were looking for a god, none could please them so much as Moloch, and Moloch could wish himself a no better class of worshipper. His temple was out in the open, far from the city or village, with their polished ways of living. It was an immense low structure with an enormous figure of Moloch at its end, like the modern industrial plant. With its towering chimney rising to the clouds, God himself appeared before his worshippers, a colossal giant of a man with a bull's head and a tremendous virile power. His arms held outstretched as if he were forever demanding sacrifices. There were 7 huge mouths to his belly, all appropriate receptacles for the offering that might be brought to him. The figure of Moloch was cast in bronze and merged with a large furnace that served as its pedestal. Whatever was fed to the god immediately landed in the fiery oven. And Molech, the glutton, would take no chances with his priests who might put away a sacrifice for themselves or share with him the fat of the land. As the sun was setting, the worshippers left their homes and wives loaded with sacrifices. They betook themselves to the warm abode of their god. And when they were on their way, a huge fire was being prepared in the pit of the furnace. And as they entered the temple, flames reflected through the bronze figure of the divinity. Cold, cruel, and metallic, Molech had become incandescent, aflame with the fire of life. Molech was the fire that does burn the bush and everything else. He was the fire that devours. As the tongues of flame shot through the monstrous figure, the worshippers yelled for joy, and they danced about it, emitting terrific cries and frenzies, hurled whatever they had into the mouths of the fiery god. There may have been products of the soil, fruits of the farm, a calf, or a sheep, or a cat, or a dog. One may have thrown his own cloak into the gaping mouth when he had nothing else to give. When the signal was given, the eunuch priests of Molech marched past the temple and about to the radiant figure. They came to serve this cruel, relentless god as the priestess paid homage to the goddess, more loving and generous. And while the fair sex was excluded, sexual passion persisted and seemed all the more fired because of the absence of women and beautiful, beardless young men, their bodies soft and fragrant from the use of oils and perfumes, sold themselves to the adorers of their god, depositing on the altar of the idol the money thus earned. Within the temple, too, there were dogs trained for the same purpose, and the coins received from the rental or sale of these animals, called the price of a dog, went to the priest of Molech. The eunuch priests constituted a caste or a sect within their own rites of initiation. These were held at night in the depths of the forest. There, in the heat of frenzy and stirred by wild music, they gnashed over their own bodies and ran about with blood streaming from their wounds, falling over each other as they did so. Women were excluded from the sheer masculine world of Molech and his tribes, but the wives of the Molechites clamored for a god and for Molech. The husbands would have none of it, but the high priest of Molech knew better, and he saw additional revenue for the temple with a sect of women doing for themselves what the men had been doing alone. Thus women too came to serve Molech. They had their priestess who prostituted themselves to the women worshippers as the eunuch priests did to the males. The priestesses dwelled in gay-colored tents around the temple of Molech, burning incense and playing soothing music and preparing love charms and potions. And both men and women danced about the blazing Molech. Two human races with no direct emotional contact, yet not without some influence upon each other, for the frenzied desire of the women for their priestesses reflectively aroused the passion of the men for the objects of their love. When the women came to offer their sacrifices, they cast into the devouring belly of Molech whatever there was upon them or within their arms. The greater the sacrifice, the more exaltation the devotee derived. In the heat of her ever increasing passion, she brought the greatest sacrifice a mother could offer. It was then that Molech first tasted the flesh of blood of the infants thrown within him by mothers gone mad with desire. Molech was the contrary god. He was the contrary to all of the refinements that human society had developed to its march of civilization. It was contrary to human nature and love and sex. The Molech man revolted against his better self, and Molech, he turned his face towards his own humanity, and he quickly ran down the ladder up which he struggled so hard to ascend.
Your Bibles, I'd like you to open them to Leviticus chapter 20, verses 1 to 5. That's about 3 books into the Bible: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus chapter 20, verses 1 to 5. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Say to the people of Israel, any one of the people of Israel, or of the strangers who sojourn in Israel, who gives any of his children to Molech, shall surely be put to death. The people of the land shall stone him with stones. I myself will set my face against that man, and will cut him off from among his people, because he has given one of his children to Molech, to make my sanctuary unclean, and to profane my holy name. And if the people of the land do at all close their eyes to that man when he gives one of his children to Molech, and do not put him to death, then I will set my face against that man and against his clan, and will cut them off from among their people, him and all who follow him in whoring after Molech."
Thank you for listening to this episode. Send an email or visit us on social media to let us know what you think about this topic. And please remember to leave a 5-star rate and review. On this month's exclusive Order of the Fellowcraft episode.
This Halloween, we are summoning the rider on the red horse. I evoke the bornless one, thee that didst create the earth and the heavens, thee that didst create the night and the day, thee that didst create the darkness and the light. Thou art Os-Oran, O Ferris, whom no man has seen at any time. Thou art Jambres, and thou art Japus. Thou hast distinguished between the just and the unjust, and thou didst make the female and the male. And thou didst produce the seed and the fruit, and thou didst form men to love one another and to hate one another. A high ritual from the Lesser Key of Solomon.
Learn more at abracast.com.